And it also matters because you know that I believe the unexpected, and this was an unexpected event, reveals character. There is no more bigger strain in my clinical experience as a psychiatrist than a relationship that's in trouble. Okay, what was the joke? Hello and welcome. My name is Dr. Raj Persaud. I'm a consultant doctor and psychiatrist, and I work in private practice in Harley Street in central London in the United Kingdom. I like to use world events to take an opportunity to give some advice to the public at large about some tips on how you can use world events and analyze them and derive some hints and advice that could be helpful to the general public. I'm fully aware of the fact that most of the public can't afford to come and see a private practice doctor like myself, and I'm very keen to give you a sense of what that might be like and why it's so different from seeing someone in the state sector, the National Health Service, for example. The National Health Service, for various reasons, although it's not a bad system, will tend to encourage conformity amongst doctors. Doctors will be forced to follow guidelines, and basically patients will end up being processed by a system. One of the reasons I want to do these videos is I want to give you a sense of what it would be like to go and see a private practice practitioner, because in private practice, given patients have to choose between a variety of practitioners, doctors are given more of an opportunity to develop their own personal opinion. In other words, they're encouraged to be a bit different. If you're not different, why would a patient choose to come and see you? And I believe that the state-run sector, in stifling difference, is in grave danger of basically killing the medical profession, killing what it's like to be an independent, autonomous professional. So that's one of the reasons I like doing these videos. So today I want to use the example of a video that's gone viral, which is Macron, the leader of France, has flown in on a trip to Vietnam to negotiate important trade agreements, but the trip has been overshadowed by an incident where his wife appears to shove him in the face in a moment that was unprecedented because no one expected it to be filmed. It was filmed apparently accidentally, and I'll talk about it in more detail. Besides treating things like anxiety and depression in my clinic in Harley Street, I also do a lot of marital therapy. I'll be analyzing the video of what appears to be some kind of altercation between France's first couple and thinking a bit about how we might use some marital therapy advice to think a bit about what's going on in this video. I also want to discuss a key tip to help couples survive and help couples survive and thrive, because one of the normal standard bits of advice, which you could say refers to the C word, and I'll explain what I mean by that later, is a bit of advice that I strongly disagree with. So I'm going to give you a tip that I think most couples aren't aware of because they're following the wrong advice they think they've heard through the grapevine from marital therapy. And I'll be giving you what I think is the correct tip that you will need, all couples will need, to survive in the long run, and in particular to survive conflict. I'll also be talking a little bit about the psychological theory and evidence over how to detect deception, how to see through deception and work out what the truth really is. Because officialdom have issued a version of events about what's happening in this video, which I think many of the public are a bit skeptical about. And I'm going to use some clues that appear in the public relations exercise here to help you be better able to detect deception in your life. Everyone has to detect deception because you're being lied to quite a lot of the time. So how do you spot that? So I'll be talking a bit about that as well. So let's start by analyzing this really very interesting and intriguing video. The background to the video is Brigitte and Macron arrive as France's first couple on a long plane journey. Bit of a clue there as to what may have happened, given the very high divorce rate that happened when couples were confined together for the first time in such an extreme way after COVID lockdown. So, a long flight where this couple have been forced to be together for a long time. The plane lands, and there's a bustle of activity as various airline officials get the steps up to the front of the plane. The door is opened, and people are bustling around, opening the door, getting the steps up there. But what we see in the video, and it's an unexpected moment, very unexpected moment, is Macron seems to be having an agitated conversation with his wife, and she shoves him quite forcibly in the face. The force of the shove into the mouth, and by the way, as a marital therapist, I know this move really well, because sometimes people are so frustrated with the repetitive nature of what someone else is saying to them in a marriage that something cracks within them, and they punch or shove or slap the other person's mouth. It's no accident it's the mouth, because what's really going on there is the other person is saying, for God's sake, stop saying this thing that you normally say. I don't know whether that's what's happened here in this video, but certainly it's the kind of thing that a marital therapist would think about, because we see it daily in our clinics. Anyway, the force of the shove is so great that Macron is nearly knocked unbalanced off his feet, and he moves a steadying hand to another part of the aircraft to steady himself, and you can see the hand shaking. You can see that the man is really a bit shocked or startled by the force of the push. The force of the push turns his head dramatically to one side, so now he becomes aware, because he's staring out the door, that actually the whole thing has been filmed, and that also that the public are out there and there are cameras out there, and he somewhat sheepishly and somewhat in an upset manner waves rapidly to the crowd in a startled but certainly disturbed manner, and then rapidly moves away from the doorway over, as we're facing the doorway, to the left of the doorway. Why run away in that way if the official version of events, which has been released later, which is that this was a couple that was joking about, why be so startled and run away from the cameras? He moves very quickly over to the left of the doorway as we look at it. Then another strange thing happens, which is when he appears again, he comes out from the right of the doorway as we're looking at the doorway. So he seems to have circled around inside the aircraft. Why did he do that? And also, he comes out from the right of the doorway, and Brigitte Macron, the wife, who looks like she shoved him in the face, they say they were joking around, but she now comes from the left of the doorway. So they're coming from opposite sides of the doorway. So they're not together, right? So why is that if they were like really getting on really well? The fact they come from opposite sides of the doorway and sort of unite to come out of the door in a very formal, slightly cold, certainly not a very friendly manner. They can barely make eye contact, which again is significant to a marital therapist looking on as to whether this was just a friendly joking around, which is the official version of events, or actually this was a couple having a real ding-dong fight, which again is something we as marital therapists can identify because we see it actively in front of us in the clinic. Another very strange thing then happens in the video. And by the way, this detailed analysis, which I think is the only way you could try to figure out what's really going on when you're trying to look behind an official version of events, this kind of detailed analysis seems to be missing. And maybe that's because often people analyzing the video are not professional psychologists and psychiatrists like myself, who have been trained to examine body language and the fine details of body language very carefully to try and figure out whether what people are telling us is the truth or not. Anyway, another very strange thing happens as they leave the aircraft, because there's a person that we can barely see on the inside of the plane who has clearly witnessed the altercation. It's a steward or stewardess. It's someone, I think it may be a male figure, but it's someone who's on the inside of the plane and has seen everything. They turn to look, both members of the couple, Brigitte and Macron, at this person, have a brief word and step outside, but they don't shake his hand or her hand. Okay, they step outside of the plane, and now they turn to the person who's been outside of the aircraft waiting to see them disembark. Now, because he was on the outside of the plane and not on the inside, he wasn't aware of the fight because he was on the outside looking away from the doorway. They shake his hand, though, both of them. Okay, interesting. Why are they shaking his hand and a bit more embarrassed about the person who saw the fight or the joking around on the inside of the plane? Then they begin to step down the steps. Macron looks back at his wife, and it's a strange looking back because it's almost like to check, is she really coming with me, or is this, is she actually going to be passive aggressive here and not even come down the steps? And then his hand reaches out in a strange way as if he wants to take a hand, but she seems to refuse to take his hand. Again, they're not really making eye contact. Quite significant from a marital therapy standpoint, and they start to descend the stairs rather glacially in the fact that they're both stony-faced. They don't hold each other's hand. There's no real physical contact between them. They stare straight ahead, and it just doesn't look really good in terms of the atmosphere between them. I want to focus on something when I come to in marital therapy, which is actually the most significant thing about this sequence of events, in my opinion, is actually the length of time from the, inverted commas, fight or joking around to the descent down the stairs, which is they seem to be basically harboring still the atmosphere of whatever happened inside the plane, because they seem a bit negative. It's the length of that negativity after an altercation begins or a conflict begins that to a marital therapist is deeply significant. But the other point I want to make is the officials around them seemed in a bit of a desperate rush to get them out the plane. And I do wonder whether it had been a difficult flight, actually. Anyway, let's go back to the marital therapy lens. So all couples are in conflict. All couples fight from time to time. You might say that fighting is the favorite thing that couples do, from my experience as a couples counselor and a marital therapist. The standard bit of advice in marital therapy is to seek to compromise when you're in conflict. A key point I want to make here is all couples are in conflict from time to time. That is not what predicts which couples survive and thrive in the longer term. What predicts it is the ability to resolve conflict. So it's kind of key this for couples to focus on conflict resolution. They do tend to get stuck, particularly the couples that are not going to survive in the longer term, with the actual conflict itself. So you've got to be focused more on what does it take to resolve conflict. Now, here's the key bit of advice. So the C word is the compromise word, C for compromise. So this is standard marital therapy advice, which is the way to resolve conflict is to find a compromise. In my personal opinion, this is terrible advice. I mean, think about a life moving forward into the future where all that's going to happen is you're not going to get your way, you're not going to have your dreams met by your partner. Instead, it's a life and a future full of compromises. How dreary is that? Let me propose a radically different alternative idea. And in all these videos, you will find I'll be proposing something radical, something controversial, something challenging and different from the conventional medical and psychiatric and psychological view. So forget the whole compromise thing. How dreary is that? Instead, let me suggest a radically different alternative way for couples to resolve conflict. All couples are in conflict from time to time. That's not an unhealthy thing. It's the conflict resolution that's the key territory to be in. So the way to resolve conflict is to move away from compromise and instead focus on another technique called make an offer. Okay? An offer is a win-win. A compromise is a lose-lose. An offer is an attempt where the starting point is, let me figure out a way to deliver what you want, while you are also figuring out a way to deliver what I want. Okay? So make an offer is about delivery, and the starting point is, let's figure out a way to give each other what we want. So let's take a practical example. One member of the couple wants to go and see the Brigitte Jones film this Friday night on date night. The other member of the couple wants to go and see the latest Mission Impossible film. Okay? A compromise would be that you went and saw a third film, neither of which you really wanted to see. Okay? That's what a compromise looks like. An offer is, we'll go and see Bridget Jones this Friday and then see Mission Impossible next Friday. Or another offer would be, let's see both films on the same night. Let's do a double-nighter or pull an all-nighter. Okay? So the offer is win-win. Another way of thinking about this, a compromise is basically a way of saying no. Try to avoid saying no as a couple to each other. It's not sexy and it's not nice. Instead, try to find a way to say yes. Saying yes is a much sexier answer in general, okay? But don't say yes, but, which again is people thinking that they're saying yes, but really they're disguising it with a no. Say yes and. So make an offer. Think about it that way. And the offer is an attempt to do a win-win and to deliver for both parties. So a key point here is I actually think couples don't need to stop fighting. They need to learn to fight better. This is a better fight, a better conflict resolution, which is to focus on an offer as opposed to a compromise. I also want you to notice something, that in private practice, where I tend to see wealthy people, and often these are business people, people in finance, bankers, fund managers, but I also see, because I did eating disorders for a while, supermodels and actresses. It's a tough job, but someone's got to do it. All these people are much more up for offers than compromises, because in the high-stakes world of finance and also the big contracts that A-list actresses sign, offers are the name of the game. Offers are how deals are made rather than compromises. Okay, so because I'm arguing in my clinic, fight better rather than just fight badly, the nickname for my marital therapy clinic amongst people in the know is the Fight Club. Oh, you're going to Raj's marital therapy clinic? You're going to the Fight Club, because he teaches people to fight. I don't teach people to fight. I teach people to fight better. A better fight is let's move to an offer. Now, here's the key point, going back to the Macron-Brigitte video. If you make offers, and the art of life and married life and being a couple, a committed couple together, whether you're married or not, is the art of making offers. You get used to it. After a while, you discover that conflict is something you don't spend a lot of time in, because you're both busy making offers, and the conflict gets resolved fast. That's a key point. The faster you can resolve the conflict, the better it is for the future of both of you. The test of a couple's ability to survive into the future is the ability to resolve conflict fast. And by fast, I mean 5 minutes or under, which seems like a startlingly short period of time. But if you get good at the offer, you won't necessarily have resolved the conflict entirely, but once you start making offers to each other, you're not fighting anymore. So the conflict, as far as I'm concerned, has actually been resolved. You're also more optimistic about the idea you'll find a solution. So the test of a married couple and their ability to stay together, or a committed couple, is the ability to end the conflict fast, 5 minutes or under, and you will do that if you adopt my strategy that I propose, which is make offers, forget compromises. Okay, so now we go back to the Macron-Brigitte fight. If was it a fight? Were they joking around? And we can see that the fact that this thing goes on for actually a fairly long period of time, in my opinion, given the pressure on them to kind of cheer up and smile and be intimate or hug each other, just for the camera's sake, is an ominous sign in terms of what really happened here. Now, the other thing that happened now in terms of the psychology of deception is Macron later, and the officials around him later, said, oh, this couple were joking around. Okay, what was the joke? Okay, so one of the signs that deception is occurring, I'm not saying they were deceiving, I'm just explaining the psychology of deception using this real-world event. One of the signs that deception is probably occurring here is the lack of detail. People who are deceiving or lying don't go into detail. People who are telling the truth can go into detail because the truth will survive that, because it's real, okay? Tell us what the joke was then. You were joking about, what was the joke? The silence on that, you know, to a professional psychologist and psychiatrist used to professionally detecting deception is frankly a bit weird. The other thing the officials have done, and Macron has done himself, which is very suspicious, is they've drawn a parallel between this video and the other video that was circulating and went viral a short while ago that seemed to allege that Macron was taking cocaine on a train with other world leaders. This is a very suspicious move in defensive public relations, because the two videos are entirely different. Okay, there is no doubt there was a shove in the face. The key question is the interpretation of what it means. Was it playful? Were they joking around? Or were they having a really rather serious ding-dong fight? Okay, the previous video with cocaine was poorly shot, and who knows what really was going on in that video. So it's a very different setup, basically. But to try and draw a parallel, as Macron has done and the officials around him, and say, aha, this is just yet another conspiracy theory, like the previous video seemed to spark off rather pointless and stupid conspiracy theories. No. This is a very different video to the other one. And it is only reasonable for people to look at this video and wonder what the hell was going on. Not least because the way this was shot indicates that actually something unexpected happened that Macron himself was surprised about and therefore tried to recover from and cover up from, which is a very different thing than what happened in the CocaineGate, if we're going to call it that, video. So the attempt to draw a link with a video that you could easily discredit with this video is very suspicious. That's not really a sensible argument. That's rather disingenuous argument, actually. Okay, so ultimately, what we have to think about here is, does it really matter? Okay, so they had a fight. So what? Couples fight, okay? They were caught a bit off guard, the cameras were on, maybe it was a fight, maybe they were joking around. So what? What does it matter? Why does it matter? Well, maybe it does matter. Maybe it matters because if this couple are in serious trouble, I don't know. If they are in serious trouble and the guy is meant to be leading France, he'll be distracted by the fact that he's not getting on with his wife. He'll be worried, if it's true and he's not getting on, he'll be worried about a breakup. This will be distracting and absorbing his mental and emotional energy, not leading him to focus on running the country and securing good trade deals. He'll be worried about the story leaking out, so he'll get distracted. His focus will be elsewhere. He'll be under strain. There is no bigger strain in my clinical experience as a psychiatrist than a relationship that's in trouble. And also, it may influence policy. It may influence policy because he may not want to take risks in quite the same way, because he's worried about how stable his support back home is, and therefore he may, for various reasons to do with not wanting to rock the boat and have enemies be pursuing him too vigorously. There's all sorts of ways in which trouble at home could actually affect leadership. So there is a sense in which it does matter. And it also matters because you know that I believe the unexpected, and this was an unexpected event, reveals character more than all the scripted stuff that we tend to see our world leaders partake in.
So one of the questions I am posing is, to what extent does it matter? Does it matter, this altercation between Macron and Brigitte? After all, as I am discussing with you, these are very common things with couples. Another reason why I believe it matters is to do with the psychology of leadership. All leaders, particularly during troubled times, have to project a psychological sense of strength, leadership, dominance, power, being in control. If you waver from that, and if there's lots of video about you on the internet where you look like you're scared of your wife and you're look a bit like you might be a henpecked or even worse, a battered husband, we're not saying that's what's happening here, but if this is the image that eventually gets projected about you, and in particular, not so much the initial incident, but the way he handles it afterwards, where he does end up looking somewhat vulnerable at the very least, all take away from the ability of a leader to project strength and dominance. And this is very, very important. One clue as to how important it is comes from the story of Churchill. Churchill is the paradigmatic leader from the 20th century, and it could be said that if it wasn't this projection of a strong, dominant character, the British bulldog, which Churchill became associated with, was kind of what the country united around during its darkest hour, to quote Churchill. So you could say that we'd all be speaking German now if it wasn't for the psychological sense that people derived a great deal of comfort, but also a national solidarity of people pulling together and working very hard as a direct result of this sense of strength and confidence in leadership and dominance that Churchill projected, more so perhaps than any other leader maybe in the 20th century. We come to Margaret Thatcher, another example, perhaps. So Macron is in grave danger of disturbing that delicate, fragile sense of his relationship with his followers as a result of video like this.
Finally, one of the things that happened was the defensive reaction for public relations people talked a little bit about this was a couple that had to depressurize, which was that an accident? Was that a Freudian slip? Was that a pun? Depressurize? They'd been in a plane, a pressurized container, for quite a long flight. Were they pressurized because they'd been in close contact? There was a very high divorce rate after COVID lockdown because of people who couldn't get on with each other really being forced into contact, and as a result breaking up. Are these long flights not a great idea? Is it pressurizing this couple? You see the pun, I don't know whether it was intended a Freudian slip or what, in terms of the press release when it said this was a couple that were depressurizing or needed to depressurize. So if they want to go that route, let's go that route. I suspect from what we've seen in this video, I don't know for certain, I'm just using the video to explain some key marital therapy and deception tools to help you navigate the difficulties of your life. We all have difficulties. I want to suggest something that I think that this video suggests. There will be turbulence ahead, more turbulence, and I think that people in France in particular, given what we've seen, may need to fasten their seatbelts. Thank you very much.